I'm Patricia, and this is Investigating Vegan Life with Patricia Kathleen. This series features interviews and conversations I conduct with experts from food and fashion to tech and agriculture, from medicine and science to health and humanitarian arenas. Our inquiry is an effort to examine the variety of industries and lifestyle tenets in the world of vegan life. To that end, we will cover topics that have revealed themselves as common and integral when exploring veganism. The dialogue captured here is part of our ongoing effort to host transparent and honest rhetoric for those of you who, like myself, find great value in hearing the expertise and opinions of individuals who have dedicated their work and lives to their ideals. You can find information about myself and my podcast at patriciakathleen.com. Welcome to Investigating Vegan Life. Now let's start the conversation. Hi everyone, and welcome back. I'm your host, Patricia, and today I am so excited to be sitting down with Niki Webster. Niki is a cookbook author, food consultant, and stylist. You can find out more regarding everything that she does, her cookbook, as well as her podcast on www.rebelrecipes.com. Welcome, Niki.
Hi, so good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to climb through everything that you're doing. We've spoken to your good chum, Bettina, recently on this podcast. So I'm very happy to get the other co-host on the podcast, as well as I love nepotism and kind of friendly relationships like that. For everyone listening, we're going to go over a quick bio for Niki to kind of garner a sense of who we're speaking with today. But prior to that, I'll give you a roadmap for today's podcast so you can kind of follow the trajectory in which I will be basing the large portion of my inquiries from. I'll first ask Niki to describe a little bit about her academic background and occupational history so we can garner a sense of what her history has offered her up until this point. And then we'll look at her personal history and rhetoric regarding her vegan or plant-based journey and where it brought her to now. And then we'll turn towards unpacking her website, blog, and podcast. We'll get into the logistics, the who, what, when, where, why, how, founding, time period, all of those. And then we'll turn to the ethos and the philosophy behind her work and how the threads kind of pull through her podcast, her book, her recipes, all of those good things. And then we'll get into some of the particulars just around the vegan culture and a lot of the issues that she's brought up on her podcast. I've had the pleasure of listening to quite a few of those. And I would love to kind of climb through some of those core tenets and get Niki's opinion on a lot of those things. That will wrap up our half an hour podcast. So quickly, as promised, a bio on Niki. Niki Webster is founder of Rebel Recipes. She is a cookbook author, freelance food consultant, recipe creator, food stylist, photographer, and qualified holistic health coach. Niki shares her easy and accessible plant-based recipes packed with fresh seasonal organic veg on her award-winning food blog, Rebel Recipes. Her debut cookbook, Rebel Recipes, was released in December. Niki has a social media following of over 300,000 and works with a range of household brands, including Sainsbury, Riverford, and Kenwood. She is the host of the podcast What the Focaccia and regularly teaches workshops and appears on panels. And What the Focaccia is the podcast I was listening to and referring to, and I hope everyone jumps on and checks that out. I will have Niki kind of drop. You can find that on her website, rebelrecipes.com, but I'll have her kind of enumerate more of those podcasts in a minute. But Niki, I'm hoping you can start us off with talking about your academic background, occupational life, and some of your vegan story as it transpires through both of those.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so in terms of my academic background, I think like many people, I've probably got a woven, interesting route to where I've actually sort of landed up now. But I basically went to university and I studied sociology and criminal justice, completely unrelated to anything I'm doing now.
Yeah.
But they were just subjects that I was sort of super interested in and loved doing. And then I sort of finished university, went back home, had absolutely no money. So I just needed to get a job. So I basically worked in a bar and then I got a job as a graduate trainee at a breakfast cereal company. And so basically the idea with the graduate trainee role is basically get a broad understanding of the business and there's a number of trainees, and I thought that was sort of a good place to start. Coming from the coming from the basis that I literally was so broke and just had to get a job. So an opening became available in the marketing department of the breakfast cereal company, and that sounded imminently more exciting than the projects and the things I was doing, working in the factory and various things at the time. So I'm very I'm quite a determined character. So when I put my mind to something, I sort of go all out and try and get it, and that sounded like a better option. So I thought, marketing, that sounds exciting. I'll go in and see what that's all about. So I got the role. And yeah, I really liked it. It was the company was in sort of transition and turmoil, and I was just sort of thrown deep end, and I had no idea what I was doing, but it just seemed like a fun, exciting, interesting, relatively creative role. So I stayed in marketing. I worked in that role for a couple of years, sort of changing different roles. It's a product management and brand management role. And then, sort of came to a stage where I wanted to progress further. I was only young. Opportunities, I was probably, getting a little bit ahead of myself. I felt like I knew everything, knew absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And then thought, right, well, I've had enough. I'm not moving, forward enough. So I'll move on. So at that time, I'd started seeing a guy. He was at uni, he'd finished uni. So he was living in Birmingham. I'm from Shropshire. That means anything to you. And my boyfriend was living in Birmingham, finished uni. So I went to looking for other jobs, and the recruitment company that I was looking jobs through said, Niki, would you be interested in working in recruitment? I had absolutely no idea about recruitment, but it seemed quite exciting. They were luring me in with the promise of, huge bonuses and lots of hard work. I've never been afraid of hard work. So, the challenge was quite appealing to me. And so I basically went to work in recruitment, sales recruitment, for about 18 months, I think it was in the end. But honestly, it was such a horrific shock to my system.
Yeah.
I was genuinely awful at it initially. And, I like to absorb things, and I like to be good at things if I can be. So I work really hard, and it's so intense. I mean, it's working 12 hours a day, and a sales role. So it was difficult, but it honestly, I feel like it sort of changed my career trajectory, I would say, just for the fact that I sort of got the opportunity to pay off all of my student loans, which, I felt a weight of, kids leave school and they have loads of debts basically. And it sort of is relatively prohibitive to what you can actually do. And I didn't feel very free having all this debt. So I basically paid it all off. And then I decided, much to my mum's horror, because I was, I've always been maybe a little bit rebellious and naughty, and I don't necessarily do the things that, people expect me to do. And so I just got myself in a situation I was a bit more financially secure. I had a, stable, if not exciting, career in recruitment.
Yeah.
And right, my boyfriend at the time was basically just going, we're leaving, we're going to go travelling for 6 months. So much to my mum's horror, she was just, up in arms, and said, how can you do this? But we're off. So went to Asia, India for 3.5 months, bought an Enfield, a bike, travelled around the whole of the south coast, or the south end of India. And then did a huge tour really. 3.5 months in India, and then we went over to Thailand for Christmas. It was very exciting. And then went to Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, back to Bangkok, flew to Nepal, did a trek in the Himalayas, and then went back down through northern India. So
brilliant. That's a great trek. Well done. I mean, and so young. Yeah, absolutely. And those countries are not frequently picked, at least not by the young globetrotters I talk to today. That's an amazing journey.
It was. And this is, I still find this quite astounding. In 6 months, my boyfriend and I only spent £1,500 each.
Excellent. You'll have to, that's a book unto itself. That's an advisory board at the very least. That's fantastic.
That included internal flights and visas. It was one big sort of negotiation. And I think that's really where my, sort of come on to talking about my recipes and things, but that's, one of the things that really instilled my sort of, passion for food and different cuisines and, vegetarian. I mean, I've always, been a sort of vegetarian vegan for a long, long time, but, those countries, they just did the most amazing, vegetarian food. So that was just such a joyous experience. I think even though we spent so little money, most of that time was actually deciding where we were going to eat every day. So that was the highlight, like what will we eat today? But that was so inspirational. So anyway, came back from traveling once again in this penniless situation, and then went back home to Shropshire, and I thought, right, I'm going to see whether I can get back into marketing, and so I did. I worked in a dairy company, a yogurt company, sort of brand management position, for a couple of years. That company was sold, and then I went to work in salad, and I worked there for a number of years. So yes, it's sort of produce, all about healthy eating, and I moved around a little bit, sort of brand management, then sort of marketing manager, and I sort of specialised in social media and digital marketing.
Nice. Were you vegan when you were traveling throughout India and Asia?
Yeah, vegetarian, but sort of vegan, because I've got a dairy allergy. So yes, I would have said I was vegetarian, but mostly vegan, because I've always had an issue with dairy. So even though I can sort of tolerate it a little bit, and sometimes it's hard to avoid things, vegetarian, vegan.
It's foretelling. I was talking to you off the air, and I listened to a podcast or somewhere where you were mentioning, as a child, your introduction, your baptism into curry paste, and how you were putting that on everything because it was like this newfound first spice, in the kitchen, as you kind of walked into the kitchen and were introducing yourself to that whole scene that you ended up in India, kind of eating. But I always tell people, my relationship with being vegan changes so drastically with every new country I go to. And it's the investigation of the local cuisine, of not just the local cuisine, the local agriculture. I was in Fiji recently, and cassava is just not something they serve a great deal in the United States, at least not on the West Coast where I live. And researching cassava and the differences between, the nutritional differences between that and a potato, and why that kind of plays into how you cook it slightly differently, and how the locals use it. And it's always growing, my relationship with it. And so for you to have traveled through all of these countries, I think people think of a lot of Asian and Indian cuisines and don't realize how many just sharply vegan, naturally vegan recipes there are, as well as how many ingredients kind of augment, vegan cooking today all over the world. So I think it's an awesome baptism into what you did. I'm curious, what was the springboard into this, you career, travel, back to career? What took you into this entrepreneurial, I'm going to launch my role, I'm going to start creating recipes? How did that all come together?
I've been into sort of cooking and food forever. I've just been the biggest foodie, and you mentioned me sort of starting to use curry paste and things like that. I've just got this really sort of strange sort of taste buds, I think. And even though I grew up in the UK, and my mum was a great cook actually, but it's just very traditional sort of in UK British cuisine, potatoes and meat and vegetables, and it's expanded a little bit now, but definitely when I was growing up it was super traditional, and I just didn't find it exciting at all. I just find it super bland, and because I've never ever been interested in eating meat, and I obviously had the dairy allergy, it was just a bit limited, what I could eat. So that's where the sort of, this whole world exploded when I suddenly discovered curry paste. Sounds really simple, but I was like, oh my goodness, I can just make food that I find, a little bit bland suddenly exciting. And then, so I suppose it's driven by me always sort of cooking for myself and having to create the food that I like to eat. So I've been cooking, had all these recipes, and I've been thinking about starting a blog for quite a long time before I actually started it, because I think I was just had a level of procrastination, and why would I do it? Would people be interested? All of the sort of physical barriers. I haven't got a blog. How can I get one? I'm really busy working. My career is really important. Just things are just busy. So procrastinated for many years, few years, and then suddenly there was just more of a sort of burning urgency to actually do it. when things get to the stage where they're sort of, if you don't do it, it's actually unbearable, mentally,
Yes.
that you just have to do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So my husband's a graphic designer. He builds websites amongst many things. He's got many hats like me, and so finally I persuaded him. He kindly made my first website. And yeah, I just started to put things online. I sort of, because I had a background in food marketing and digital marketing, I sort of knew what I was doing. So I decided to, start all the platforms at the same time. Instagram, 5 years ago, was not the huge beast
Right.
that it is now.
Right.
Yeah, but I loved it because I'm an incredibly sort of visual, sort of creative person. So for me, even though the things I was putting on there were hideous, not aesthetically pleasing, just, looked awful, but it was still a really lovely creative outlet, and and just something that I could do for myself, because I was doing all sort of stuff at work, which was fine, the job was good, but I was just feeling it, increasingly more frustrated that I just had to work for myself, and yeah, it was getting uncomfortable. Even I was sort of rationalizing
Not
it,
to do
thinking
it.
that job is good, it provides a steady income, I've worked hard to get where I am, but I just really wanted to work for myself and see whether I could do it.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's an interesting point. I like, from your background, I don't talk to a lot of, I think maybe some are more well-versed than they like to give credit to. I think that the great fear with chefs is that you'll take away from the recipe design and things of that nature if you talk about the stylization or the visual aspects of the food. They bring photographers in, they have it done, but that part is very unspoken of for the cookbook. And I like your attention to, and your honest, candor with the idea that you like stylization of food and, menu design and recipes. It's like you're not afraid of that design aspect. And I'm really curious, because I haven't had the honor of cracking your cookbook yet, which I promise you I will do in the near future. But I wonder, when you went to create that, how much of the conversation was about, there must have been some kind of a rapport between the two, because you're visually and stylistically very in tune with the appearance of food and stylizing food. How much of the creation or the direction or the route that the cookbook took was based on that aspect, as opposed to the recipes? Was there any conversation that directed the flow, or which foods made it in and which didn't, because you're so keen to be open and honest with some of those visual aspects of food?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I suppose my whole business and success of my business stems from online and from Instagram, which is clearly a visual platform,
Right.
and so it's all intrinsically linked. So yes, I mean, I don't know, I've got lots of thoughts on that, actually, because
Yeah.
everything I make, I'm sort of thinking about it from a visual perspective. And I think that I can pretty much make most things attractive, because a lot of the food I post and eat and in my cookbook and online,
Mm-hmm.
they're quite brown, actually. I mean, I eat a lot of like lentils and curries and
Yeah.
vegetable things, because I always want to post authentically what I'm eating. And that's a sort of conversation around sort of how things look visually, and also I suppose people's marketing plan in terms of sort of online, and I know that lots of creators absolutely create food purely for the visual aspect, because they know that
Mm-hmm.
that's popular and that's part of their business model, and it is in my mind, and I will think that I need to make this look attractive. However, it is still about, for me, the taste and genuinely what I'm eating, and having sort of a documenting, this is what I'm eating, this is what on a day-to-day basis,
Mm-hmm.
rather than creating specific content, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
it does. And I think the two actually have a lot of conversation between each other in an unspoken way. Bettina, your buddy, and I were talking about eating seasonally.
Yeah.
And she converted me. I feel like I talk to so many nutritionists and vegans a week that you couldn't possibly introduce a new idea, and bam, there it was with Bettina. And she said, even with the greenhouses, even the ability to eat year round, it doesn't taste the same. She doesn't believe it does the same thing for your body, which I don't now either. And she was talking about genuinely tasting a strawberry in season and what that tastes like from a responsible farm, and comparing that to the difference of one grown year round. And I was thinking when I hung up with her, even the vibrancy, like I was at the market, strawberries are in season, and she was right. They have never, if you look at the most vibrant, saturated foods in real life, right, IRL, then you are looking at things that are very much so in season. And then that's having a conversation with the visual, with the taste. If it's looking vibrant and you haven't shoved chemicals all over it to get it that way, it's going to taste beautiful.
Yeah, because you absolutely eat with your eyes. So if
Right.
something looks vibrant and juicy and gorgeous, you're going to want to eat it. But I completely agree. I'm a huge fan of organic veg boxes. I sort of harp on about it all the time because it's just such a sort of super easy way of firstly knowing what's in season, and secondly sort of having this gorgeous seasonal product that's all organic, all grown perfectly, sort of delivered to you. And it's like an education in itself, because with a weekly box, it's there, it's fresh, it's hopefully grown locally ish. If it's always a bit of a challenge in the UK because it's not the warmest of climates, so
Right.
but obviously in the summer now we're benefiting from loads of, I just had a huge rainstorm actually, but you're literally getting the best of the produce at the moment, so it's just the best time. And that in itself is super inspiring. And that's again how I sort of tend to develop recipes. I sort of take the raw ingredient, which for me is sort of the veg, the seasonal veg, and then basically create sort of recipes around that, and that sort of I use that to sort of guide how I develop. And then it's not only fresh, but it's healthy, it's in season, and it's like it's like a little roadmap of how to eat
Yeah.
seasonally.
And I'm curious about that. I was wondering how because you're kind of guided by your own light. So the curation process, it sounds like what's in season. And then do you take any following feedback? Do you ever hear fans say, listen, I want you to show me how to cook this? Like, how much of it is directed by what you're doing and what you think is cool at the time? And if it is just all based on you, where do you get your influences? Do you go out? Do you talk to, obviously the pandemic has put a damper on these kinds of inquiries, but prior to that, do you kind of expose yourself to influences that will then curate what you're making? How does all of that come to be with what you're creating right now?
Yeah, it's sort of a combination of everything, I would say. Because I've been sort of developing content and developing recipes for quite a while now. I do sort of know what people want from me. So, but of course, that in itself is driven by the type of things I like to produce and eat.
Right.
So, yeah, so it sort of feeds into each other. I think people have come to expect from me a certain type of recipe, so they know they're going to get a whole food recipe. It's going to be natural products, it's going to be seasonal veg, it's going to be organic, it's going to be pulses, it's going to be veg based food. That's at the center, so they sort of expect that. And then I'm always sort of having a conversation with myself like, maybe I should be doing a few more cakes. People make more cakes
Right.
from, they may want chocolate, but it's
Yeah.
not something I'm sort of instinctively drawn to. Some people are so passionate about baking, they love making all the desserts,
Yeah.
but because that's not something I typically eat that much, I don't really do it. So it maybe is producing things quite selfishly, but then I also think it's coming from a place of natural food, whole foods, and seasonal veg. So hopefully, if I can make it tasty enough, which I'm always trying to do, sort of inject loads of layers of flavor and spices, and also I think that sort of food is quite accessible. It's store cupboard, it's quite cheap.
Yeah.
If you've got the basics, pulses and some grains and some nuts and some seeds, and then you add some nice seasonal veg, but that's cheap, but you can make big batches of food and you can make it delicious. It sort of ticks quite a few boxes.
Absolutely. How many of your recipes did you take for your cookbook, Rebel Recipes, from your website, Rebel Recipes?
About 25.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked with a publisher, and they felt that that was because some recipes in some recipes over the years just I was like super popular. So I think it's nice for people to have it in a, like a handheld format rather
Yeah.
than accessing it online.
What are your baptismal recipes? And when I mean that, I mean from non-vegans. What do you like to serve most on a personal level, or recommend other people make, who are kind of getting societies and communities? A big conversation happening amongst vegan and non-vegans that isn't angry is one of like, how do I introduce them to this without, there's a great deal of fear with people who think that, they're going to be missing out on dairy, meat, all of the things that they've been used to. Do you have like go-tos that you recommend for yourself or for others that people make?
Yeah, I think you sort of have to think about making people really satisfied and happy. So, for example, if you serve someone up, a big plate of salad, it might be healthy and it might look gorgeous and be very vibrant, and it might be seasonal, but I don't know, someone's not necessarily going to be really satisfied from that. So I really love sort of big, hearty, sort of comfort food type dishes. So I would, probably have a really lovely, spiced curry or something, or stew, but then not just that, because that's good in itself and you can feel all comforted and happy, but then have some layers of flavor. And I always create big feasts. So
Yeah.
that is a problem I have. I can't just create one dish. I have to sort of have, okay, this is my main dish, and then let's just sneak 3 others and some flatbread and some crunch. And I think that's some dips, and then a bit of salad, and then some pickle. And I think that's what people are missing sometimes when they're not eating meat, that sort of like different flavors and textures. And so if you have that, so something that's like big and hearty and comforting, and you've got some vegetables and some roast veg and some pulses, but then you've got something sharp like pickle, and then you've got some flatbread to mop it up, and you've got some creamy hummus, I mean, you're going to feel pretty excited and satisfied by that meal, because it's just an amazing texture combination.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think that one of the negative associations people have with veganism, which I'm not sure where it stems from, I think it comes from the early punk movement that was in the 80s, where a great deal of people expressing the vegan philosophy were very, very like anorexic looking white boys walking around. And so I think that was like somehow, because I feel like one of the negative associations is that vegans don't eat, where pound for pound, my meals and the amount of food I consume, because it's so much, raw and whole fruits and vegetables, it's actually quite much a great deal larger than someone who's actually eating meat or cheeses, which are dense and kind of like on your plate, and so I think that this huge abundance visually of food is kind of this like, and now we feast, it kind of flips that on its head, which is delightful. I'm wondering so I forgot to go over for all of my nerdy little founders out there, the logistics of, can you just rattle off really quickly when the website was founded? Did you have co-founders? Did you take any funding to found it? And what was originally the content of it?
Yep. Founded in 2015, and it was basically all just purely myself, and just done at the same time as my marketing job. So for the first 18 months I was doing it alongside, because I needed an income. So I was just working really hard, I used to sort of exercise at 6 a.m. Before work, and then I just swapped it. And so instead I would get up and create content.
Nice.
Yeah. And then, yes, I was just obsessively creating content constantly. And as I said, pretty badly initially, but I really wanted to work. And I was studying hard to, make myself look a bit more appealing. And then it was quite slow initially, and was, as I said, was working at the same time. And then I got better, gained more followers, more opportunities were appearing. I won the Soul Association Food Blog of the Year award, which was amazing, about sort of 8 months after I started, which was just incredible. And things started to roll really. And I just felt that, there was only so much I could do. And I thought, right, I'm just going to sort of take this scary leap and, resign and see what happens. And then, it's just been a sort of like up and down sort of roller coaster, but absolutely amazing. And I think, I always say that, and I sort of felt that if you don't take the chance, you don't take the chance. And, I'm going to regret that forever. In the end of the day, I'm sure I could get a marketing job again. So it's when you take the risks that exciting things happen. And if you sort of have confidence that you have the sort of work ethic sort of to work. And I was literally, I think like most people, sort of saying yes to absolutely everything. Yes, I can do that. Don't know whether I can, but I'll give it a go and make it work.
Yeah.
And so I was all sorts of crazy things, and some things work, some things work not so good, but you know, it's all a learning process. And yeah, and then it's just sort of evolved, and things have definitely changed over time. But yeah.
Well, and to that end, I kind of want to pull on that thread a little bit, just because you're across the pond, and I can go on and on about the vegan community here over the past 10 years and the change it's currently even undergoing, this incredible spike. I actually really adore being on the flagship, as it were, of the second wave of veganism in this country, because I think it's exciting to see things change and manifest. And this is where this podcast is built out of, the rhetoric and the growing change of vegan worlds. But I want to know about the UK, which I haven't. I visit Ireland a great deal, and so I know a little bit about their scene. And I was just in Australia and Fiji and a bunch of those places. But the UK, it's interesting. I've spoken to about 30 people so far for the podcast, and about 7 or 8 of those have been people located in the UK. And they talk about, so there's been 2 schools of thought. One of them was that they felt as though, the US had a greater threshold and stronghold on the vegan culture, and the UK was kind of behind, if you will, and taking notes from it. And conversely, I've spoken to a great deal of Americans that believe that, well, they had one of the first institutions in, just outside of London that was certifying and talking about the philosophy of the vegan culture, and had like an actual certification program in vegan dietary cuisines and things like that. And so they believe that the UK was the forefounder of it. And neither of that's important. As to who was really the granddaddy or grandmother of the whole thing is not here or there for me. What I'm curious about is right now and the past, over the span of your professional life, what has the growth and tone been like for the vegan culture? I know it was niche and tiny and small, but what has it been as of the past 5 years in your eyes as it relates to food and your industry?
Oh, I think it's been so interesting. Firstly, because when I started all my channels and my blog, it was absolutely in that niche stage. There was really no one talking about it at all, and there's a few people across the world that I had the pleasure of connecting to make me feel less weird. But yeah, tiny. And then I don't know, it was like, for me, it felt like a whoosh, just an explosion. And I felt there was some resistance in the press, and then it just was like a tidal wave of acceptance, I think, in the UK, and now it's unbelievable. Of course, there's been no restaurants or anything for the past few months, but pretty much all restaurants, even in obscure areas now, they've got vegan options. The supermarkets are incredible. I mean, my friend Derek Sarno has been sort of instrumental in developing the Tesco vegan range, and then all the other retailers pretty much followed suit, and they've got huge ranges. So from my perspective, I'm all about eating sort of natural foods, and I provide recipes that aren't necessarily a replacement for meat. But if you're the sort of person that's just moving into veganism, or you do want something that emulates that sort of meaty taste a little bit, the ranges are huge. So there's so many options everywhere. I mean, in London, I don't live in London, but the restaurant scene in London is amazing. So yeah, it's exploded. It's a sort of super exciting time. Cookbooks, online platforms, everything.
What year do you think that happened? Can you cite like a year or a time period in which you really felt like that change happened?
Yeah, I think it was a couple of years ago that things really escalated. I think the year before it was moving, and then a couple of years ago it just exploded.
You personally, do you find that with the acceptance, you're able to bring in not more eccentric, but maybe more eclectic, or let's see, in baking, like arrowroot? I mean, I couldn't find it 10 years ago without going, a bit outside of town. And now, those types of things are even coming down in price because of the commonality of vegan bakers cooking with things like that, those kinds of thickening agents. But I'm
Yeah.
curious, do you find yourself being influenced by it as a creator? Do you find yourself kind of broadening what you are inspiring people to cook? Like, how has that kind of infiltrated you, the way you cook and your business, with this kind of acceptance opening up?
Yeah, I, I don't think I've ever really created recipes specifically for vegans.
Okay.
I've I've always just created, I hope, I try, this is my aim, really tasty plant-based food, vegan food that I hope is accessible to everyone, because, you know, not, again, this is a huge thing in the UK.
Yeah.
And I think this is instrumental in terms of people's acceptance. It's really now, you know, there used to be this stalwart of people that were like die-hard meat eaters that, you know, would never ever eat a vegan meal. You know, that's just poison. Now, I know personally people that are like, oh, I'm doing meat-free Monday, I'm reducing my meat content. So that's just, for me, that indicates the real shift change. So how I basically develop recipes is basically, this is some really delicious veg-based food, and I hope vegans are going to like it, vegetarians are going to like it, people that are reducing meat will like it. So, you know, it's open to anyone.
Yeah.
But in terms of ingredients, yeah, I think there's a lot more awareness now, because there's so much stuff in the press, there's so much stuff on TV, it's becoming more mainstream. Those sort of weird niche ingredients are definitely becoming more accessible. I mean, you know, I suppose there's always been things like plant-based milks, but I mean, now in the UK supermarkets, there's 20 plant-based milks, you know, there's 5 vegan cheeses, you know, it's just amazing everywhere. And when I first started doing workshops, they were like, what is nutritional yeast? You know, is it
Yeah.
just the yeast? And the amount of workshops they've provided the ingredients, and I've got like a little pot of yeast or fresh yeast, and like, no.
Right.
But it's changed. People know that now.
Yeah, they do. I agree. And I like that. I like all knowledge. You know, I don't care which camp you subscribe to, but I want everyone to read the same information so that we can argue adequately, especially when it comes to nutrition and health and things like that, that I think are direct byproducts of the vegan culture, which is another reason why I think the COVID-19 pandemic has resurged and, you know, acclimated regardless of its roots. And I don't even get into the wet market conversation with anyone other than friends, but the conversation with health has always been here. And I'm glad to have that be like one of the things that's most quickly attached to the vegan lifestyle. You did drop the word, and I usually wait for all of my guests to do it. You said plant-based 3 times. So I'm going to ask you, what is your key and fundamental difference between being plant-based and being vegan? And how do you define each for yourself?
So vegan for me is a lifestyle choice, and for me that's more of that is an ethical choice and more of a commitment to being sort of vegan in all aspects of your life. So not wearing leather, sort of commitment to, you know.
Ooh, hang on one second.
Also adopt.
Niki, I lost you for 1 second there. So just come back to say, you said it's a lifestyle choice, and that goes from not wearing leather, and then you cut out. Can you go back to that?
So vegan is more of a bigger commitment. It's a lifestyle choice, sort of making commitment to have a cruelty-free lifestyle, not wearing leather, you know, not you know, having cruelty-free makeup and beauty products, and it's a much broader lifestyle thing. For me, plant-based is much more centered around having a plant-centric diet, and embracing, you know, could be vegan, but it's more about having a sort of, you know, a plant-focused
Yeah.
diet.
Okay. And to that end, does plant-based denote health? Because that's been the next connection that everyone's making, that the marketing industry has just attached onto that and flown off into the sunset, with plant-based denoting organic, health, healthy, those types of things. Does that work for you?
To a degree, because I think that, you know, on a really basic level, including more plants and plant-based derivatives and sort of natural products in your diet, for me, that's sort of an easy way to make you a little bit healthier if you're eating natural foods and plant-based foods and vegetables and fruits and things like that.
Yeah.
Vegan, in my mind, it's an ethical commitment. You could be healthier being vegan, but it doesn't necessarily go hand in hand, because you can be a vegan and just eat sort of, you know, processed vegan food, but, you know, do it for purely ethical reasons. So I find them, you know, separate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to separate them, regardless of how one defines them. They need to be defined. I think it's crucial also to have individuals define and companies how they're using those terms, because I do find that most vegans believe that that title vegan is much more of a lifestyle and philosophy. And
Yeah.
those who are not vegan view it as a dietary restriction. So it's an interesting, disconnect, if you will,
Yeah.
that I think is solved by defining terms, which is, I think we should do more of across the board in all of society and civilization. Defining one's terms would clarify a lot of things. I want to jump quickly into the podcast. I know we're kind of coming in on time, but I loved it and I loved listening to it. And again, I spoke with Bettina, who is on this podcast series a few weeks back. And I told you off the air, and I kind of want to bring it back onto record right now. What I liked about it is I'm kind of picky with my podcast. It's not just because I'm a podcast host. It's because I care about information and knowledge. And then I also, I care about show personship and flow and those types of things. And I really like your podcast. I've listened to 4 of them, and I think there's 7 or 8 total that I could find online. And I want to know when it was founded. But I have to put it out there that I think that the flow of information is very succinct and different. And you would think that it might be the same. I thought, oh, they're both going to be saying the same thing and simply agreeing with one another. And it's simply not what happens. You guys have such different perspectives on things that you bring and augment. And then when you bring your guest on as well, I think it's just this kind of beautiful round table, and you're keeping your times tight at like 20 minutes. I have to applaud you for all of those things. But I want to know when you launched it and how you kind of develop what you're going to speak about around it, because you come into some very core topics about vegan food, vegan culture, aspects of nutrition, all of those things. So how do you curate the show? When was it founded, and how do you continue moving forward?
So we started recording, I think it was October last year, and then it took some time, as I'm sure you know, to sort of get the guests penciled in and actually available and on the show. And then we worked with the producer to sort of edit it a little bit, and then just to cut out the repetitive stuff. And then it launched in January, and then we basically launched one every week for 6-7 weeks. So actually, in terms of the content, it's really quite organic, because Bettina and I know each other really well and have quite a good sort of bantery dynamic, sort of slightly challenging with each other, and definitely aren't sort of too polite, and we're happy to sort of disagree with each other. I think that sort of naturally works, and that's really why we thought that we might be okay doing a podcast together. And then we just sort of think about what we would love to hear and what we think the audience would love to hear from the person that we're having on the podcast. And of course, it doesn't necessarily always go to plan, because, people, it's a conversation and people, say whatever they want. But that's how we do it, really. So it's really quite organic, and we didn't necessarily know, we did it, quite intuitively, I would say. So if you think it's good, then that's amazing.
It is. I do. And I'm picky. I think it's magnificent. I always have to preface that. I am really picky. I'm picky with my fashion and my podcasts. I don't have any leeway there. So I really do enjoy it. I hope everyone gets on. Where can everyone find it? You can find it on your website. You guys are on iTunes. You're on Spotify.
All the normal places. Yeah.
And it's called something.
So a bit of a cheeky name.
What the focaccia. I love it a lot. Yeah. I think it's appropriately titled too. And it's easy to remember. I like that, and the name. I'm wondering, as we wrap up today, I wish we could talk longer. I always wish that, but with you particularly so. I'm wondering what you think. I do want you to be brazen here, because I think that those are kind of the best answers, and people are afraid to talk about the future, particularly more so now. But where do you see some of the biggest changes and movements happening for the vegan industry, in so much as it affects health, as a subsequent effect from diet and food? Where do you see the next 5 to 10 years playing out, if you had to kind of surmise from everything you've experienced thus far?
Honestly, I don't know. I think the world is in such flux at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, the ground, for me, I feel it's shifting by the day. So things which felt normal, and you can maybe make a prediction last week, something is happening, today, and everything's changed.
Yeah.
So, but I do feel that on the whole, people are just becoming way more aware, in terms of society and health, in terms of their diet, in terms of, ethical and moral decisions. And, I think this lockdown situation has given people the headspace to actually think about things, what's
Right.
important, what isn't important, what do I want to do? Am I going to change things? And what's good for the planet, what's good for me, but am I doing all this stuff and I don't need to be doing it? So I don't know, I'm really hopeful, because I think that, yeah, it's like a weird reset, and people
Yeah.
are thinking about things much more, and also in terms of sort of like food, people are cooking more, so they're thinking about what they're putting on the table, they're having to think about it 3 times a day, and getting more engaged with it. So generally, I think I didn't think that being a plant-based trend was going away anyway, but just because people are much more conscious and aware now, I think, than ever before, I
Yeah.
think it's just going to continue to grow.
I agree with you. And I think the demystification of food and the reconversation that people are having with the food that they thought they knew, is part of that beautiful natural evolution that you described happening. It wasn't going away before and is probably augmented with the most recent endeavor. Well, Niki, we're out of time, but I want to say thank you so much for all of your conversation today. I really enjoyed it. And I hope everybody tunes in, listens to your podcast, jumps on your website and checks out your cookbook.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
Absolutely. And for all of you listening, thank you so much for giving us your time. We have been speaking with Niki Webster. She's a cookbook author, food consultant, and stylist. She just had her first book come out, Rebel Recipes, and you can also jump online, www.rebelrecipes.com. Check out her podcast from there, as well as she's got a ton of wonderful YouTube blogs, recipes, consultancy information. There's so many great things. And thank you for giving us your time today. Until we speak again next time, remember to stay safe, eat well, and always bet on yourself. Sláinte.